Anthony's competition match. Let's put that on regular speed. This match is fast enough as it is. Okay, so Anthony decides to pull guard. When you pull guard, you want to pull guard in a way that you can work from. So you want to make sure that you pull guard into some kind of dominant grips. So that's something to think about. He's able to move into an ashigarami to try to isolate the leg. That's really nice. He capitalizes on his opponent's missed base. So he notices his opponent is not basing out properly here. And then he comes up on top and uses that as a sweep. Now if he stays on top for 3 seconds, he's going to get his points for the sweep. So I think he got 2 points for a sweep there. Now his opponent's trying to isolate his arm to try to, he changed his mind because he wasn't getting anywhere, to get a kimura, and Anthony was connecting his hands behind his opponent's back, which is a wise way to shut that down. But now that his opponent's not doing it anymore, he wants to free his head and get back on top. Okay, so that, if he stays on top for 3 seconds, that would count as a sweep for his opponent, which ties up the match 2-2. So from here, Anthony wants to get better positions with his arms. He wants to get this underhook, ideally, in order to use that as a tool to escape. It's a very scrambly match, a lot of back and forth. So he managed to recover a half guard over here, not give up the pass. His right arm is being useless right now, in fact being dominated by his opponent. So his priority for escaping would be to recover this arm position, as it will give him a lot more options. This arm's really not helping him. And his opponent was able to capitalize on that upper body control to win the lower body battle and end up in mount. Beautiful bridging escape there. That was really nice reversal. Now that he's in guard, he wants to make sure his opponent can't submit him with the kimura threat. So he wants to control his opponent's arms, maybe digging the other arm in as he's doing, and then get his posture controlled. So he wants to get his posture back up, pin his opponent back down to the ground, and then he can start working and focusing on the guard pass. Here he's a little bit off balance. Like his opponent's controlling his head, his opponent's controlling his arm, and he's just got this one leg posted up. I think it would be better to reset this knee on the ground, try to win the upper body battle, so remove the collar tie, free your wrist, pin your partner's biceps and back to the ground, and then start working on standing up. That would be a more reliable strategy to escape. However, he's able to capitalize on his opponent's sloppy triangle attack. His opponent throws the leg over without having a lot of control. Anthony's arm's in the way, so he's able to push on the leg, free his head, and find his way into a top position. Here, he made a mistake of going too high too early. So his opponent is turtling up, and Anthony rushes to control the neck. But if your opponent's turtling up, often you want to control the center of their body. So maybe controlling the hips a little bit more. If you have your hooks in, then you can start attacking the upper body. And it's not wrong to go get an upper body control early, but if you're completely on top of your opponent, then you can be flipped over. So he's got to make a choice here. Either he steps his hips off to the side and then can work on controlling the head and neck as he was doing, or he's got to start controlling the hips. But in this case, because he doesn't have control with the hooks, he gets a little bit too high, and his opponent is able to shake him off. Although I think he might be getting his hooks in after all from that movement. That was really good. I narrate corrected. Wow, I would hate to have to ref this match. There's so much going on. This is a tricky one to ref. Okay, so let's take a look at that. He gets into mount. I don't know if he gets his points for it, but because he has to stay here for at least 3 seconds. But in mount, like side control, there's a look to the pin, but then there's the function of the pin. In side control, if you just have your chest on your opponent's chest, you're in side control. But if you don't have any upper body control, they're going to escape in a matter of seconds. Similarly in mount, he's in mount, but he needs to control at least one of his opponent's arms. So at least one of the spaces between armpit and hip, he needs to dominate, right or left side. Here he's got one arm around the head, but both of his opponent's arms are on his hips. Because of that, his opponent's able to easily switch into a butterfly guard and then free his leg to go back to playing open guard. So the mistake to correct there would be when you get into mount, you need to dominate at least one side of the body. That could be with an underhook. That's often the most common way to do it. But you can't let your partner get both upper body frames on you. So here we find ourselves in another position where Anthony's letting his posture be dominated by his opponent. So he's accepting a collar tie and wrist control, and that's just putting you in a vulnerable position for attacks. You don't want to let that happen. This arm could be a lot more proactive. Right now the arm's not doing anything, but if he circled the hand inside, he could remove this control over his head and then regain his posture. There he's circling it in a little bit, but he's not using it quite to address the arm. That's cool. His opponent switches to a lazy omoplata, although he doesn't have his arm very well isolated. And Anthony makes a nice choice to roll on his left shoulder and then turn around to face his opponent and come up on top. That's a really nice classic omoplata defense. Well done on that. Now, what could have helped him here would have been a crossface. You see his opponent is able to sit up uncontested. If we go back a little bit, Anthony rolls through on his omoplata escape, and now he's looking to consolidate a pin inside control. But his opponent is trying to sit up this way. So what Anthony could do is take his right arm and reach it around his opponent's head to bring his opponent's head further away from him. That's one thing that he could have done with his right arm. And then with his hips, he wants to close the space between the two of them to not let his opponent re-guard with his left leg. So those two things could be happening simultaneously. Sometimes when you get a sweep, it's nice to consolidate in a less than ideal position rather than give up control. So if he had gone for the crossface here, he could have had a chest-to-chest half guard pin and then work towards a pass from there. But instead, because his partner's upper body was not controlled, his opponent was able to sit up, and it turns into a sloppy scramble, which he ends up on the bad end of because his legs are in front. His partner gets to do a reversal and pin him on the ground. Right here, Anthony's flat on his back. He should be on his side because he has the underhook. He's got his half guard and he has the underhook. He needs to get on his left side now to not be flat on his back, to open up some back take opportunities. But if he stays flat on his back, he'll have less escape possibilities. And his opponent, this is another moment of challenge in reffing. There's a lot that happens here. So his opponent manages to squeeze through for the pass, and then immediately Anthony does a bridge and finds his way back out. I think that's the end of the round. That was an exciting round. A lot of back and forth, a couple small errors to correct, and some really cool decisions too. Nice omoplata defense. Let's see the third round. We got a little break, and we go 1 minute later, third and final round. Okay, there's a messy scramble of action there. So his opponent stuffs his head down. Anthony takes that as an opportunity to sit and then maybe wrestle up. So he wraps up a leg here and reaches up. In this case, if he wanted to finish the wrestle up, he would need to drive forward up over the shin, perhaps circling around, pushing into his opponent. But his opponent steps over him and dominates the position and winds up in mount. So his opponent's going to get 6 points for that, 2 for the takedown and 4 for mount position. Now, because he was able to hold mount for 3 seconds, he got his mount and takedown points. If Anthony had been able to do this escape that he ends up doing right away, then he would not have conceded any points. In general, I don't recommend connecting your hands around your opponent when you're on the bottom trying to escape. Sometimes it can work out, as it does for Anthony in this case, but in general, it limits your escape possibilities and allows your partner to stay stuck to you, which is doing their job of pinning you for them. But in this case, Anthony's able to do a nice hip switch and bridge and find his way to the top. Because it's an escape and not a sweep, he doesn't get 2 points for it, but it's still a very good thing to do. He got out of a bad position, and now they reset into a neutral position, the closed guard. Here, Anthony's doing a better job of addressing the collar tie that he had previously left unaddressed, so that's a nice improvement. He is, however, letting his opponent choose the grips here, and we see his opponent putting the collar tie back in. So when you're in this neutral position, the neutral position stops being neutral when one of the people enforces their grips and their game plan. So in this case, the bottom player is getting grips on the top player, so now there's a slight advantage to the bottom player, the guard player here. Although Anthony did a good job of posting to remove that threat. Now his opponent attacks a triangle. This is happening because his arm is being controlled by his opponent's grip here. Because his opponent has a straightened arm with the wrist control, he knows that there's room here to pass his leg over his shoulder. Now a triangle happens when there's one arm in and one arm out of the guard. In this case, the bottom player, the guard player, is creating that situation by keeping this arm out of the guard and keeping this arm in the guard. Really nice attack from the bottom player. Anthony, in this case, is stacking his opponent, ends up rolling over, and gets tapped out. What I would have liked to see in that situation is, first of all, the prevention would have been good, not letting this hand get controlled. But once you notice, okay, boom, there's a triangle on, now your main defense before the triangle gets locked up is posture. So he wants to get his head up and away from his opponent. You can even put your knee on your partner. So which knee to put is the knee of the side of the arm that is in the triangle. So in this case, Anthony's left arm is in the triangle, which means his left knee could come onto his partner's thigh to help him push up and get more distance. If he were to get his head more elevated, I think he even started to do that. I see his leg getting up here, but his posture is controlled. His head is low, and his head's lower than his hips. When your heads are low, when your head and shoulders are lower than your hips, that's when you're easily rolled over or swept. And he gets put into a mounted triangle. That was a nice submission from his opponent, really clear setup. And we go to round 3. Let me skip to it. Here we go. Round 3. All right, what's going on here? So right from the get-go here, his opponent establishes a collar tie, and Anthony, rather than stripping the collar tie, accepts the head position, which puts him in a bad spot. That's not a good spot to be fighting from when your opponent's controlling your head like that. Anthony does have an advantage of being a very flexible person, and so he can often use that to create really cool and funky scrambles and get out of positions. But unfortunately, in that situation, it didn't work out for him. Let's see. So here there's another difficult to score kind of situation. So he's in a half guard. His opponent passes the guard, gets to mount, but doesn't establish control for 3 seconds. Anthony is able to slip his head out, come on top. It's a good, really cool scrambly match. All right, from here, Anthony should focus on pinning his opponent instead of holding on to the head. So here he's got the leg lace. Now this arm should switch to a cross face, so on the other side of his head, so he can get a chest-to-chest pin and force his opponent down to the ground. But because he's not doing anything to keep his opponent flat on the ground, in fact he's encouraging his legs to be scissored so he could go belly down, his opponent's able to build a base back up, and they keep scrambling at each other, pushing back and forth, and Anthony ends up on the bottom. So here we see a moment where they get pushed over, and now Anthony has his arm around his opponent's head in a way that's not going to be very useful. So what he needs to do is release this arm and establish a better control point with this arm. Now, it looks like his right arm might be already on the other side of his partner's hips, so he could try the ghost escape. But this arm here is probably not in a good spot because it's over his partner's head. His partner can isolate that arm. And I think that's what his partner tries to do here as he steps over tries to get to mount and tries to isolate Anthony's arm and get him into a better pin. As the scramble ensues, there's another bunch of exchanges of positions. So his opponent is in what could be considered quarter guard, and he jumps over for an armbar, and lets it go because he thought there was a tap. So this is another. Anthony is one of the hardest people to armbar that I've ever rolled with. He has extremely flexible elbows, which if you're not used to training with him, you'll probably not armbar him because you'll expect him to tap, or you'll think you've broken his arm, but he really just is almost double jointed, really. So he puts his thumb up to show that he's okay, and then and then this guy thinks like, wow, I've extended the arm, I'm gonna let go, but it was just a miscommunication, and and so they keep going. That's pretty good. The ref's confused. He says, "What happened?" He says, "Ah, yeah, I just gave the thumbs up. I thought I armbarred him, but it's all good." Now, this is maybe some advice for Anthony. He does have this advantage of being very flexible, and but a crutch of that is he tends to rely on it in ways that prevent him from developing sharper technique. So in that case, he shouldn't have ended up in a position with an extended arm. Luckily, his arm is flexible enough that it's not going to end in a tap or a break, but he shouldn't end up in that position to begin with. Let's look at the scramble that led to this. So his opponent shoots in. Anthony's coming at him with high arms. So this is something that you want to think about. If you're engaging a standing opponent and you don't want to let them have access to your legs, you need to have at least one arm, preferably the arm of the lead leg, so in this case the left arm, a little bit lower so you can catch an underhook if your opponent shoots in on you. As he's coming in high, his opponent decides to shoot in, head on the outside, hands around, just a classic double, a bit of a bad position. He's doesn't have his hips under his shoulders, but he's able to keep driving and bring his opponent down to the ground. So that was a really nice attack, nice read of the situation from his opponent. And once you're here, then you've got to be aware that your opponent might step over to mount, so this leg should not be on the ground. This thigh should be in contact with your partner's torso. Just tracking them and preventing that from happening, which just happened there, the step over to mount. From here, Anthony has hit twice his upa escape, his bridging escape from mount in previous matches. Maybe he's getting a bit tired or his opponent is adjusting to his strategy. He wasn't able to hit it there. And they're going to reset to the middle. In mount, his opponent jumps for the armbar, and Anthony is just squirming around trying to find a way out, kind of like a modified hitchhiker escape. His opponent's definitely confused. And he pulls his elbow out. And again, we saw this in the first round of attacking a belly down partner, but being too high. So here he's a bit too high, and because of that, he gets pushed off, and his opponent runs out from underneath him. Now they're in a half guard. His opponent goes for another arm bar. That's great. Anthony rolls out of it. This is kind of like a modified hitchhiker escape that he did, except with his arm fully extended. His opponent goes for, might have a reverse triangle. I'm not going to guess the full thing now. He's trying to do really nice attack sequence from his opponent here. The Kimura from the triangle. It's a cool combo. And the ref has no idea what to do with that scramble outside of bounds, so he just starts him up standing again. Okay, Anthony pulls guard. So when you pull guard, you want to pull in a way that gives you grips that you can attack from. In this case, Anthony pulled with a really deep head control, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. It's nice to have if you do get the kind of guard that you want to attack that kind of front headlock stuff from, but if you end up pulling into a half guard, that's really not the position you want your arm to be in. If you're in a full guard, maybe you do want that, and you also want a front headlock kind of position with that, or a pinch headlock. But here, this left arm would be better served as an underhook or as a collar tie to push his partner away and get some distance. Right now, Anthony's flat on his back, but he would be much better on his side. So he's starting to get to his side a little bit there. That's good. And that's time. Super, really exciting match. A lot of scrambling, a lot of nice details, nice things that were done, a lot of mistakes too, things to work on. Anthony actually left our club recently. He went to train somewhere else. So good luck on your jiu-jitsu journey, Anthony. You're welcome back anytime, and hope to see you at competitions sometime soon.